Welcome to the channel. I'm so glad you're here. In today's video, we'll explore how your priorities shift as you age and why friendships might not be as important after 70. But before we dive in, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Now let's get started. The secret to true fulfillment after 70: fewer friendships, more peace. 1. You no longer need to prove yourself to anyone. As we grow older, one of the most freeing realizations is that we no longer need to prove ourselves to anyone. Think back to your younger years. How many of your friendships were built on impressing others? Whether it was making sure you were included in social circles, or striving to meet expectations at work or in your personal life, a lot of our energy went into fitting in and maintaining a certain image. But as you reach your 70s, things begin to shift. The pressure to be accepted or admired slowly fades away. By the time you're older, you've lived enough to realize that seeking external validation doesn't lead to true happiness. You start to understand that your value doesn't depend on other people's opinions. You don't need to constantly prove yourself, because at this stage, you've already built your legacy. You've accumulated wisdom, experiences, and personal growth that don't need to be validated by others. Take Harold, for example, a man in his early 70s who spent most of his life climbing the corporate ladder. He was always surrounded by colleagues and acquaintances, keeping up with the demands of social status. His friendships were often formed out of convenience, more about appearances than real connection. But once Harold retired, those friendships faded away, and for a while, he felt the urge to keep reaching out and maintaining ties. However, after some reflection, he had an epiphany. Why should he invest in friendships that existed simply because of work? Why should he hold on to relationships that were never truly meaningful to him? This realization led him to a more fulfilling path, one that didn't depend on impressing others. Harold started focusing inward. He rediscovered old hobbies and spent time doing what he loved. Most importantly, he no longer felt the need to impress anyone or live up to external expectations. The result? Harold felt freer. Without the constant pressure to maintain relationships for the sake of status or social standing, he was finally able to live for himself, on his own terms. And that's what aging gracefully is all about: living authentically and prioritizing personal fulfillment. You no longer need to chase after friendships just for approval. You define your worth, and that's more than enough. 2. Peace becomes more valuable than socializing. As Harold began to embrace his newfound independence, he realized something else. The constant buzz of socializing wasn't as appealing as it once had been. For most of his life, staying busy and maintaining a wide circle of friends had been synonymous with fulfillment. Social gatherings, phone calls, and the pressure to always be on had been part of his routine. But as he grew older, his priorities started shifting. The energy he once put into socializing now felt like a drain rather than a source of joy. At first, Harold felt guilty about stepping back from his social obligations. He thought he was supposed to enjoy these connections, that they were essential to his well-being. But as time passed, he realized that peace, true, uninterrupted peace, had become far more valuable to him than any social gathering. The constant noise, the chatter, the small talk, it no longer held the same allure. What he craved was something quieter, something deeper, a sense of calm, without the expectations and obligations that come with being social. Many friendships, even the good ones, carry a certain weight. There are always phone calls to return, invitations to accept, and unspoken expectations to stay connected. While these social ties can be meaningful, they can also become a responsibility that feels more like a burden than a joy. Harold had spent years feeling obligated to keep up appearances, to attend events just because it was expected, and to always be available when someone needed him. But now in his 70s, he was starting to see his time in a new light. One afternoon, Harold declined a lunch invitation from an old friend. It wasn't because he didn't care, but because he finally realized he didn't need to fill his days with social events to feel connected. He spent the afternoon taking a long walk through the park, simply enjoying the fresh air and the rhythm of his own thoughts. It was one of the most peaceful moments he'd had in a long time. And that's when he understood peace was no longer something to be found in constant socializing, but in the quiet moments of solitude. Choosing peace over social obligations didn't mean Harold was withdrawing from life. It meant he was embracing a new kind of fulfillment, one that didn't depend on the expectations of others. And with each day, he found that the more he embraced his own company, the more he felt truly connected to the world around him, in a way that didn't require noise, drama, or obligations. 3. Fewer friendships mean fewer disappointments. As Harold continued to embrace his newfound sense of peace, he started to realize something that had been true all along. Not all friendships are worth keeping. He had spent years surrounding himself with people, some of whom were truly close, but many of whom faded away or never offered the same level of support and care he had given them. The more Harold distanced himself from social obligations, the more he saw how his past friendships were often one sided or based on convenience rather than genuine connection. And unexpectedly, he felt liberated. Harold's experience wasn't unique. Many people in their later years begin to notice how friendships that once seemed so vital are in fact more of a burden than a benefit. As you age, the pressure to keep up with everyone fades. You begin to realize that quality trumps quantity when it comes to the relationships that truly matter. At a certain point, you no longer feel the need to maintain friendships that don't serve you, those that bring more disappointment than joy. You start to appreciate the relationships that genuinely add value to your life and let go of the ones that were never really mutual. Take William, for example, a man in his late 70s who had spent decades forming relationships that he thought would last forever. He had always been the one to reach out, make the effort, and keep the connections alive. But over the years, he started to notice that some of his closest friends were no longer there when he needed them most. They became too busy, too distracted, or simply too uninterested in maintaining the relationship. At first, it hurt. It left him questioning his own worth, wondering if he had done something wrong. But after some reflection, he came to a powerful realization. He wasn't the one who had changed. He had simply stopped accepting relationships that didn't meet his needs anymore. William found that the fewer friendships he had, the fewer disappointments he faced. Instead of stressing over who wasn't reaching out or who wasn't keeping their promises, he started focusing on the relationships that truly mattered. He connected more deeply with his family and a few lifelong friends who valued him for who he was, not just for the effort he put into the relationship. The pressure of maintaining friendships that didn't bring real happiness started to fade, and in its place, he found a profound sense of freedom. In your later years, the idea of having a long list of friends becomes less appealing. The fewer people you try to please, the more you can focus on the ones who matter most. And that, in itself, is an incredible gift. No longer burdened by the weight of unmet expectations, you can enjoy the peace that comes with genuine, meaningful connections. And when you let go of friendships that no longer serve you, you're left with more time and energy to invest in the relationships that truly enrich your life. Touch 4. Your time becomes more precious. As Harold and William began to let go of the social expectations tied to friendships, they realized something incredibly valuable. Time becomes your most precious resource as you get older. In their younger years, time seemed abundant. There were endless days filled with work, social gatherings, and managing friendships. It was easy to fill the calendar with things to do, people to see, and places to be. But as the years passed, they began to understand that time, as it turns out, was finite, and it was up to them to decide how best to spend it. Harold, now fully embracing the peace he had long sought, began to take a step back from social obligations that no longer brought him joy. He'd spent so many years worrying about keeping up with friendships, attending events, and maintaining a busy social life. But now he saw those activities for what they truly were: time-consuming obligations that drained his energy. He no longer needed to feel compelled to attend every gathering or respond to every message immediately. Instead, Harold started choosing how he spent his time, focusing on the things that made him feel alive, not just busy. He spent more time reading, something he had always loved but had neglected for years. He took longer walks in the park, enjoying the quiet moments of reflection. Harold found a new appreciation for the simple, quiet moments, those that allowed him to reconnect with himself. It was during these moments that he realized the value of time wasn't in keeping up with people's expectations, but in living on his own terms, choosing peace over obligation. William, too, found himself questioning how he was spending his time. He had been one of those people who always said yes to every invitation, believing that keeping busy meant staying fulfilled. But after years of maintaining friendships that weren't truly fulfilling, he started to realize that the constant socializing wasn't adding any real value to his life. He no longer wanted to waste precious time on relationships that were more about habit than genuine connection. One afternoon, William had a breakthrough. While sitting through another routine gathering, listening to the same old stories, he suddenly asked himself, "Is this how I want to spend my time?" The answer was clear: no. He realized that time was something he couldn't afford to waste, and he began to say no to the things and people that didn't truly bring him joy. Instead, he devoted his time to things that nourished his soul, like exploring new hobbies, learning something new, or simply enjoying the calm moments of solitude. As Harold and William both discovered, time becomes more precious with age. And when you realize that, you begin to spend it more wisely. The more they let go of unnecessary social obligations, the more they found room to focus on themselves, on what truly made them happy. In the end, both men found that living life on their own terms, free from the pressure of meeting others' expectations, was the most fulfilling choice they could have made. 5. True companionship comes from within. As Harold and William both began to focus on quality over quantity in their relationships, they both experienced a significant shift in how they viewed companionship. No longer relying on outside sources for validation or fulfillment, they discovered a powerful truth. The most important companionship you can have is the one you build with yourself. For much of life, society teaches us that we need other people to feel whole, that companionship is only meaningful when shared with others. From a young age, we're told that being social is key to happiness, that loneliness is something to avoid at all costs. But Harold and William's stories revealed something different. True contentment doesn't come from external validation, but from self acceptance and inner peace. Harold, who had spent years surrounding himself with people for the sake of connection, started to feel something he hadn't experienced in years: a deep sense of contentment in his own company. He realized that for most of his life, he had been adjusting himself to fit into other people's expectations. He had constantly worked to maintain friendships out of obligation, not because they truly brought him joy. When he finally let go of that pressure, he found that the time he spent alone wasn't lonely at all. Instead, it was fulfilling. He took long walks in nature, read books that sparked his interest, and spent time reflecting on his life without distractions. He discovered that solitude wasn't about isolation. It was a choice. It was about enjoying his own company and doing things that brought him happiness without having to answer to anyone else. He wasn't seeking approval or validation anymore. He had already built his own sense of worth, and it was enough. William, too, came to a similar realization. After years of feeling pressured to keep up with social obligations, he found that when he embraced solitude, he felt a sense of freedom he hadn't experienced in decades. He no longer needed to fill his time with constant social interactions to feel connected. Instead, he began spending more time on his hobbies and personal interests. He focused on his health, traveled more, and learned new things, all without the pressure of maintaining a busy social calendar. True companionship, as they both discovered, comes from within. The more you learn to enjoy your own company, the less you rely on others to fill the void. You realize that you are enough, and when you stop seeking external validation, you find peace. The best relationships are the ones that don't feel like obligations. They flow naturally, without the need for constant effort. And those are the relationships that truly enrich your life. As Harold and William found, the most rewarding companionship is the one you cultivate within yourself. I'd love to hear your thoughts after watching this video. As we get older, the way we view friendships and socializing changes. It's not about rejecting people or becoming isolated, but instead about realizing that your time is precious and your relationships should bring value and joy. Have you ever felt like maintaining friendships became more of a burden than a joy? Or maybe you've started to embrace solitude and found peace in it? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts, whether you agree with the idea that fewer friendships can mean fewer disappointments, or if you feel differently. What has your experience been like as you've grown older and your perspective on friendships has shifted? Also, don't be shy to let us know where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far our community reaches. Your feedback means a lot, and it helps me create content that resonates with you. If you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upcoming videos. I truly appreciate all your comments and support. It motivates me to keep creating content that helps us all grow and reflect together. Let's keep this conversation going in the comments.